Hey, Chris Ferdinandi here with another Vanilla.js quick tip. Let's get into it. Sometimes you need to call multiple API endpoints as part of a project. Let's look at some strategies for doing that. The promise all method accepts an array of promises, and it doesn't resolve itself until all of the promises in the array resolve. If one of them fails, it rejects. This is useful when you have two or more APIs and need data from both to continue. For example, the JSON placeholder API has a posts endpoint that returns a list of blog posts and a users endpoint that returns a list of post authors. We want to generate a list of blog posts from the posts endpoint and merge author data from the users endpoint to generate a UI. Since the fetch method returns a promise, we can create an array with fetch calls to our two endpoints and pass it into the promise all method. And so that's what I'm doing here. I'm passing in fetch calls with both of my endpoints as an array into promise all. Then I'm attaching a then method to it. And inside my callback function, I get back an array of responses, which I am going to log to the console. And if we jump over, you can see what I'm actually getting back is the response objects from the fetch call, just like we would if we were to make one fetch call, except now it's an array of them. Now let's look at how we can actually work with the response objects that we get back. So here I am again using the promise all method with my fetch calls to my two endpoints. And I'm passing that array of responses into a then method callback function. Inside that callback function, I'm going to use the array map method to create a new array from my responses with the response JSON data using the body JSON method. Now remember, the JSON method returns a promise, not actual JSON data, and that eventually resolve. So I now have an array of promises that will eventually return the JSON data that I actually want. I'm going to pass that array into the promise all method and return that. So what's going to happen is once these response JSON methods all return actual JSON data, promise all is going to resolve and my next then callback function will run. And at that point, the data parameter will be an array with the JSON data from my two APIs. The first item being from the posts endpoint, and the second being the data from the user's endpoint. And they will always maintain that same order, which is really helpful. So if I were to jump back over to the browser and reload, you can see I now get back an array, and it contains two items. The first is an array of responses from the posts endpoint, and the second is an array of responses from the user's endpoint with some names and some details about them. Because the promise catch method will run if any of the APIs that you use fail when you're using promise all, you should only use this approach when you absolutely need all of the APIs to succeed in order to complete your task. If you can progressively update your UI or complete other tasks as APIs successfully return, just kind of, on a rolling basis, that's often the better approach because it's going to reduce the amount of time between when you make the calls and when stuff happens for your users. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe and maybe even share it with someone else who you think might enjoy it. You can also get my daily developer tips newsletter over at gomakethings.com, where every weekday I share a new tip, trick, tool, or Vanilla.js snippet to help you build a simpler and more resilient web. Thanks so much for watching.